Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Rogers. I'm a co-curator of Cinetopia Doc, and I'm really delighted to be here tonight with director of Agatha's Almanac, Amalie Atkins. So the film feels part of a long lineage of cinema about older relatives, aunts, grandmothers, and elders, but also I think your film feels distinctly modern. And Agatha herself feels made for screen, independent, practical, and has this undeniable, amazing presence. One of my favorite characters, honestly, that I've seen from this genre, if you will. I read that you had previously worked with your aunt, and that experience played a role in your decision to make this film. Can you tell us about your relationship and how that shaped your interest in approaching Agatha as a subject in your film?
Sure. I mean, I've known her my entire life, and she would come to my house when I was growing up every time my mom had another child. So there's 5 of us. So every time there was a baby in the house, Agatha would be there. So I had early impressions of her command of a space and command of, yeah, any situation. She was great at stepping in and taking charge of the domestic sphere. My mom was her youngest sister, so they're very different people, and, I witnessed their relationship growing up. So anyway, I'm gonna skip ahead many, many years to Saskatoon. I moved to Saskatoon and worked on several films. By the time I got to the second 16 millimeter film, I was searching for a character who could play the matriarch of this world of women, and I asked Agatha if she would like to be in the film. So I went to her house. Um, that would have been sort of midway through the project. I shot with her and my other aunt. So the two of them, my mom's other older sister. So Emily and Agatha are in my grandmother's house. That's the first time I shot in that space. And I think at first she misunderstood. They both misunderstood me. They thought I was, I'm their I'm their niece. What am I doing? It's like they're they thought I was just taking photographs, because the Bolex camera isn't so obvious maybe to someone who hasn't seen a Bolex camera before that it is in fact taking, moving images. So after a while, they it was a really funny and bumbly start, but we got the scene. Agatha puts on 40 aprons in that scene. She just keeps layering them on, and my other aunt is passing them to her. And they did this willingly and without question. So, and Agatha was so easygoing on camera and really seemed to understand how to perform for the camera. And so that was I mean, it wasn't at that moment that I decided to shoot this documentary, but it was an early indication. And then we went on, she came to Saskatoon and we shot scenes here in my house and she met the crew. She's so good on screen that at some point in that process, I mean, it was a 10-year process doing those two films. Somewhere along the way, I thought, as soon as I wrap this project, I will next, I really want to shoot a documentary with her, want to shoot with her in her space and not have her play a character, have her be herself on camera because it's sort of ever giving. Her space is continually offering more visuals, more information, more knowledge. There's really no end to what she could potentially offer uh, a film.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I think the other thing that when you talk about the space, I feel like the space feels great, quite universal, but also regional in terms of, being very much placing it within Canada and, in that part of Canada. So I wondered how much you were thinking about how much the film was exemplary or an exemplary representation of life and, a family in Canada and traditions of that come from your background, but also sort of a universal story about us tied to the land and how we navigate that.
My main focus was diving into her world and um, trying to capture as much as I could with whatever time that I was given in order to do so. And so I really didn't step back from that process until I would say once it was finished and once it saw an audience. And then I began to realize, I mean, every time I show it, um, I've been continually surprised at how people are connecting and how it does have this universal appeal, how it reminds people of their grandmother or their great aunt or their grandfather, anybody from that generation. And the last trip that I went on to Amsterdam, which is the beginning place of Mennonites. But I met a woman, a fellow filmmaker from Friesland, and she was unaware that there was this huge population of Mennonites in Canada. There is a massive population in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And so it was really interesting to me to connect with her about these large gardens that are, this is something that is evident in her life as well. And um, as time has gone on, I hear all these stories about other. I just thought Agatha had a huge garden. I didn't understand that. No, this is culturally very common among Mennonites of this generation to have these massive gardens. And so, yeah, I was really honed in on her world and not necessarily aware that it was part of something much, much bigger.
Oh, that's fascinating. Watching the film, I keep returning to that question in the film, like, what do you see? And I think the film trains our attention to the small details like color, gesture, how we perceive life. And when you began filming, what did you feel like we were being asked to see with that, with your camera and and what you were trying to share?
I mean, I really wasn't thinking much about an audience at all during the filming, but what I was interested in doing was capturing every detail. Like, I'm so interested in detail. And when I started working with the 26 mil lens, the macro lens, I could really get in and see things that I couldn't see with my eye. So I think maybe that's when it was like, I want to share these um tiny details that I'm not noticing with my eye, but with this particular lens, I can really capture things like the tiniest, most beautiful frost in some of the winter scenes, for example. And her handwriting, like these things,
Yeah.
unless if you're looking at them with like a magnifying glass, if you're going around your house with a magnifying glass, you won't necessarily notice them. So that's what I was interested in gathering to create the film. There's so much color in her world and outside in nature.
As you just mentioned, color feels like one of the film's most expressive tools, and I really honed in on the red, like strawberries and watermelons and buckets and almost everything. Like red seemed to be like a recurring theme, and I guess maybe I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you used color throughout the whole process, from the filming to maybe the editing and whatnot.
I've used red quite a bit in other projects. If you Yeah, the film that I finished prior to working with Agatha had a lot of red in it, and then when I went to shoot with her, um, discovered that she also has this love of color, which maybe growing up I wasn't always aware of, or what maybe I just wasn't paying attention to it or wasn't looking for it, but, once I started spending more time with her, it it's everywhere. Everywhere in her world is color, her wardrobe and all the objects around her, her bowls and her, you open any cupboard. There's color her giant collection of red socks that I wonder if she maybe pocketed those when she was at Deer Lodge. They all have labels that say Deer Lodge on them. Um,
I found Agnes's sense of style like striking and colorful and very creative in the way that like you said, her house, but also her outfits were.
I think it's innate for her. You know, in the film, she talks about my grandmother's creativity, and I think sh she's, you know, she's clearly in that mix, and I could just as easily say all of the same things back to her that she said to me about my grandmother. Some of the outfits, you know, her pairing, she had a purple, I think a red blouse with a purple layer on top, and I remember getting there and she was like, "Oh, these colors don't go together. Do you want me to change into something else?" I said, "No, this is perfect." So, and we did work together on like, sometimes she was wearing what she was wearing for the scene, and sometimes we would go together into her closet and select the outfits for the day. So she was, you know, in many ways, she was a co-director of the film.
Yeah, and that brings me to my next question, actually, because I found one of the powerful moments is seeing Agatha actively discuss with you what should and shouldn't be filmed, and your decision to leave that in.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to respect her boundaries, but I did push in certain aspects when I would phone her and she didn't know, she wasn't aware of every phone call that was recorded. So then I would ask permission afterwards because I wanted there to be some candid qualities to the film as well. I mean, it's because it's shot on film, it really uh it is hard to have spontaneous moments. And then there were setups where I had a Zoom recorder and would sit down and interview her. And I think there she would feel quite comfortable as well because no one else was around. It was just the two of us, and she could get into yeah, it was some of that was easier to capture in a casual, uh, intimate way. But yeah, she approved everything that went into the film in the end. She found some of it quite funny. She was like, "When did I say that?" Yeah, she definitely had a lot of say.
The film feels extraordinary record of like knowledge being passed down and like skills and like oral tradition and practices. Did this film make you think about sort of that sense of lineage or mentorship or and inheritance or think a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it was what I was really looking for, through the whole process of making it. So the Bach side of my family, so Agatha, my mom, and my aunts, and I have a huge amount of cousins, and they all came to the screening in Vancouver, and it was quite something because I thought this was like an individual process for me for finding this kind of like creative lineage for myself. That's what my aim was. And when I showed the film in Vancouver, I was so shocked that so many cousins showed up, that had cousins that drove 12 hours to come to the screening. And I think a third of the audience was cousins that night. There was over 40 cousins, and we all met for brunch the next day, and I realized, okay, they're all like, we're all influenced by this, um, legacy that Agatha has created. So I didn't anticipate that it would not only connect with people out in the world that I don't know, complete strangers, but that would also be this process of reconnecting with my cousins. You know, they wouldn't have had a chance to see Agatha either, so it was this wonderful way for her to connect with them. And she bought her ticket. She was like, "I'm not missing this. I'm not missing this party. I am coming." She was arranging it all herself. She wasn't gonna miss it.
Amazing. And this is your first feature film like that for screen. But one of the things I just really loved is that you describe the editing as like associative, and I just feel like it lulled me into this life, and I just, it really just captured like my attention for so long. But I just wanted to ask you about the edit process, and over with 6 years of filming, how much how you sort of approach that. And I believe Agatha also had some input as well during the process.
Yes, of course she did. Yeah, so every time I would go in and film with her, I would come home, wait for the film to come back and then edit together whatever footage I had. And there was a lot of um, pretty intense things going on in my own life, which I have not shared publicly, but at the same time, I'm gonna share it with this audience, okay? At the same time that I was making this film, we had to rebuild our house. So we had lost our home in Saskatoon. We were living in a 1905 house, went to renovate it, pulled off the kitchen, came home, and they were like, "Oh, sorry, your foundation isn't gonna sustain this addition." So we had to tear the whole house down and rebuild our home. So this is going on simultaneously to working on the film. So that is part of why the length of time,
Mm.
very intense process to go through losing one's home. But at the same time, working with Agatha and maybe that is even partly why I had started the project before this happened, but it became extremely important to me to connect with um, her, my mom's home and her home, and have this connection with family that was quite stabilizing. So the editing process, and this does actually relate to editing because it was where I could go um, to experience stability and calm. And so by the time the film was done, the house is done, and it got me through to to the other side of this chaos. Um, and yeah, to answer the part about Agatha's influence, I went to visit her for her 90th birthday and showed her, I think it was like we made it through the first hour of the film, and she just said, you're really gonna need to cut this down, which was extremely helpful because it's hard to let go of footage, and there's a lot of footage that didn't make it in. It was 2 hours at that point in time, so I spent the next 8 months trimming it down, and I had applied for CPH docs. I'd applied to festivals but I was still continuing to edit. I thought, well, until somebody's taking the film, I'm gonna keep working on it until someone says yes.
I was also really taken by some of the stories that Agatha, that the talk of the loss of Agatha's sisters, and how sort of she approached the loss in her life, and sort of her vision of living, and the gratitude of living every day. And I think it's such a great way for us all to watch this film at the beginning of the year, which is why we chose it for this month. But I learned a lot from Agatha, but I was wondering what you hope audience might learn, or unlearn about what it is to live a full life, and what you hope people take away from it.
I think one thing that I would hope for is attention on I think it's really easy for us to get caught up in our day-to-day lives. And if you've got someone older in your life, if you've got a living grandparents or a living elderly relative, I think, it what I would hope is people would feel like picking up the phone and calling, or going to visit, or taking a break from your life to give some attention to a senior that's in your life. Because they can be difficult. It can be a challenging relationship. Um, and I think one way that I was able to buffer this relationship with Agatha was making the film. And now that we're no longer shooting it, I'm not going to see her as often, and I feel like I should be. But the film gave me this great reason to go and spend long days with her. But I think there's other ways, you don't have to make a film. You could you could just record audio on your phone if you wanted to interview a relative or write something. I think there's other creative ways to engage. If you I think the buffer is helpful if you are working with a senior who's challenging. That can kind of help structure time in a way that maybe you feel like, oh, I don't have 8 hours of time, but maybe you have 20 minutes to make a phone call and learn something, because I think they all are going to have things to tell us that are um, unusual, and maybe we haven't thought about in the ways that they've thought about things.
That's wonderful. And again, thank you so much, Emily, for taking the time. Thank you for sharing your film, but also thank you for taking the time to talk more about it tonight with our audience.
Thanks for having me.